Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of the lost chapters of Adventure Time, the song before the Mushroom War, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Tonight, we're opening a story that doesn't exist on any screen. A story whispered only between the ruins and the stars. It's said that before the world of Ooo, before candy people and magic and the playful chaos of the land we know, there was another melody, faint and fading, a song that belonged to a world on the edge of its final breath. It wasn't sung by heroes or wizards, but by the hum of neon signs and the quiet whir of distant satellites. It was a song of the old Earth, a lullaby played in radio static, and forgotten lullabies carrying through the heavy air of a dying century. Some say, if you listen closely, you can still hear it beneath the sound of rain in the Ice Kingdom, a ghost frequency from long ago. The story begins not with an explosion, but with a man sitting alone under flickering fluorescent light. His name was Simon Petrikov, a scholar, an explorer, and a man in love with the unknown. He was studying ancient artifacts, though even he didn't know that one of them would change the fate of the world forever. The crown sat before him on a table, glinting faintly under the pale light, humming with a strange, crystalline whisper. But this isn't quite his story yet. This is the story of what came before the crown began to sing. Out beyond the window of his little lab, the world had already started to fade. Cities still buzzed, but they were hollow inside. People moved fast and spoke loudly, but no one looked up at the stars anymore. The sky was full of satellites, blinking like artificial constellations, watching over a planet that had long forgotten how to dream. And yet, in the hum of that world, there were still moments of wonder. A child in a glowing city, tracing constellations on the ceiling, pretending the dots of light were heroes from old myths. A musician on the street corner playing a broken tune that made strangers stop and smile, even if just for a heartbeat. A scientist recording the faint signals from deep space, unaware that what she was hearing wasn't a star at all, but the echo of something ancient stirring in the dark. Every sound, every flicker, every sigh of wind became part of the same quiet melody, a song that was slowly building toward its end. It's strange to think of the Mushroom War as a single moment, a flash, a tragedy carved in history. But in truth, it was a slow unraveling, the kind of ending that begins long before anyone realizes it's begun. Machines humming a little too loud, ice melting a little too fast, people growing a little too tired of hope. And yet, the earth was listening. Beneath the cracked pavement and rising waters, something vast and patient began to dream. Somewhere in the deep places of the planet, far below the layers of dust and memory, the roots of magic began to stir again. Maybe it was always there, sleeping, waiting for the noise of humanity to fade just enough to be heard again. Like an ancient melody humming through the soil, rising through forgotten tunnels, reaching for the open air. There are stories that say Princess Bubblegum's first spark of consciousness wasn't born from science, but from that buried hum, the echo of the world's rebirth. Others whisper that the elemental forces fire, ice, slime, candy were fragments of the old Earth's final dream, scattered like stardust when the bombs fell. But before that dream, there was still one final night, the last night before the world became Ooo. If you could stand in that moment, just before the light changed, you would see cities glowing softly against the horizon, their towers still breathing, though the air was heavy with unspoken fear. You'd see Simon walking home through the snow, humming to himself, unaware that the ground beneath his feet was already rewriting its future. The snow that fell that night wasn't entirely snow. Each flake shimmered faintly, reflecting colors that shouldn't exist, hues that seemed to hum when you stared too long. It was the first sign that something beyond human understanding had begun to merge with the physical world. And somewhere far away, across oceans now long gone, a lonely radio tower began to sing. No one knew who built it. It had stood there since before the war began, a forgotten relic sending signals into the sky. But on that night, its broadcast changed. It played a single note over and over, pulsing softly through the dark. Simon would later describe it in his journal not as sound, but as feeling, like remembering a song from a dream you've never had. That note carried across the world, through the falling snow, through sleeping cities and quiet hearts, echoing through time itself. Some say it was the world's final heartbeat before it became something new. Others say it was the first breath of Ooo. Whatever it was, it lingered. Even as the skies turned white and the world changed shape, the note kept resonating, embedding itself into everything that would come after the trees, the mountains, the rivers, even the people made of candy and flame. It became the foundation of magic itself, a melody that no one could hear, but everyone could feel. And somewhere, deep beneath the ice, Simon felt it too. He wrote about it later in the early pages of his notes, long before the words turned erratic and icy. The handwriting was neat then, each line carefully drawn, the thoughts still belonging to the man he once was. He described how the air had changed that night, how the silence had a texture to it, like the world was holding its breath. The note, that single sound, followed him even in sleep. He would wake and think he still heard it, humming faintly through the walls or through the wind that slipped beneath the door. He didn't know it yet, but the crown on his desk was resonating with that same frequency. The gems embedded in its silver frame glowed faintly whenever the note returned, and when he reached out to touch it, the room seemed to breathe a pulse that wasn't quite human, not quite natural. There were others who noticed the change too. In the northern valleys, near what would one day become the Ice Kingdom, snow began to fall even as the temperature rose. Clouds gathered and twisted in slow spirals, forming shapes that almost looked like eyes. People said the weather had gone mad, that the world's seasons were arguing with one another. And in the oceans, deep currents shifted. Strange creatures, luminous and old, rose toward the surface, as if answering a call they'd forgotten long ago. A scientist stationed on an offshore platform reported hearing a melody through her sonar equipment. The pitch wasn't random. It followed a pattern, a song with rhythm and repetition, almost mournful, almost alive. She wrote that the sea was singing back. No one listened to her. By then, the world's attention had already turned fear to politics and weapons and whispers of something inevitable. But far beneath all of that, in the marrow of the planet itself, magic was awakening. It didn't begin like the magic we see in Ooo, no glittering spells or vibrant colors. It began quietly, through resonance. The fabric of reality began to remember what it was like to dream. The air thickened with possibility. The soil began to hum in tune. Every living thing, from the smallest insect to the oldest mountain, began to shift ever so slightly toward something new. And in the middle of it all, Simon worked late into the night. He traced the crown's runes under candlelight, whispering to himself as though trying to translate a language made of stars. Sometimes he thought he heard voices, not words exactly, but emotions pressed into sound, sorrow, loneliness, a plea to be understood. It frightened him, but it also drew him closer. He had always been curious, too curious, perhaps, and the crown's whispers became like lullabies that promised answers to everything he couldn't name. He didn't know it yet, but the song of the old world was slowly weaving itself into him. Across the planet, people began to dream differently. They saw strange lands filled with living candy, kingdoms made of flame and slime, forests that breathed and rivers that spoke. Some awoke with tears, unable to explain why those visions felt so real, like memories from another life that hadn't happened yet. And so the old earth began to blur. The walls between what was real and what was imagined grew thinner by the hour. The song beneath the world became stronger, reaching through machines, through wires, through hearts. One night, the note that had haunted Simon's sleep changed. It lengthened, unfolding into a melody slow and sorrowful, yet somehow filled with light. It was as though the universe itself was singing a lullaby to its dying body. Simon wrote, "The world is humming in its sleep. I think it's dreaming itself into something new." No one would read that line for 1,000 years. By the time anyone found his journal, it was frozen beneath the ruins, preserved by the cold and the crown's grief. But that night, that first night of the world's rebirth, something beautiful happened. Somewhere in the ruins of an abandoned city, the first sprout of new life pushed through the cracked asphalt. It glowed faintly blue, releasing a pulse of warmth into the frozen air. It wasn't just a plant. It was the first magical being of the new age, born from the world's forgotten dream. The note changed again, brighter now, resonating through the earth like laughter. In that moment, the barrier between magic and matter broke completely. Every sound became a possibility, every vibration, a memory being rewritten. And far away, the crown began to sing. Simon felt the melody move through him like cold fire. He saw visions, a land bathed in pink light, a mountain crowned in ice, a young boy with a golden sword running through endless fields. None of it made sense to him, not yet, but it felt important, familiar. The song reached out to him, gentle and terrible, all at once. He realized then that he wasn't just hearing the end of one world. He was hearing the first heartbeat of the next. The silence that followed was unlike any silence Simon had ever known. It wasn't empty, it was full, heavy with the presence of everything that had just been born. It felt as though the world itself was holding him in a frozen embrace, whispering that, though all had ended, something beautiful had just begun. Snow drifted endlessly outside, carrying a faint shimmer in each flake. When they landed on Simon's sleeves, they didn't melt. They pulsed faintly, glowing with soft light, as if they were tiny echoes of that song still vibrating through time. The world around him was hushed, but not dead, it was listening. Through the silence, a slow pulse of warmth began to rise from beneath the ice. Deep in the earth's core, magic began to bloom like a heartbeat. It flowed outward through the cracks and fissures, through the roots of mountains and the veins of stone. Each pulse carried fragments of memories, faces, and feelings that had once belonged to humankind, and compassion, laughter, sorrow all rewritten into new forms of life. From the ashes of the cities, the elemental forces awakened. Flame found shape again. No longer a destroyer, but a being capable of joy and fury. Water, remembering its freedom, began to take form and voice. Slime crept and bubbled, reshaping matter, while the essence of sweetness, that small spark of warmth left from humanity's yearning for comfort, took root in the soil. That spark would one day grow into the candy elemental, long before she would call herself Bonnibel. And from the snow, the ice elemental stirred. His heart was ancient, vast, but also lonely, and as the crown's hum merged with the pulse of the newborn world, Simon's own heartbeat echoed within it. The crown's magic didn't consume him instantly. It folded him in, slowly. It wrapped around his grief like frost on glass, preserving it, refracting it into infinite shimmering patterns. He walked for miles through the newborn landscape, unaware that he was tracing the first lines of what would become the Ice Kingdom. With each step, his breath formed new valleys of snow. His tears, falling onto the frozen ground, crystallized into tiny spires that glittered like towers. Where he lingered, the air grew colder, not cruelly, but peacefully, a kind of stillness that carried its own fragile beauty. Above, the aurora began to form in streaks of violet, blue, and pink, cascading across the darkened sky. It was as if the heavens themselves were singing in response to the crown's melody. That light, so soft and unearthly, washed across the broken remains of the old earth, bathing it in hues of renewal. The war had burned away nearly everything, but it had also stripped the world clean, leaving behind only potential. It was a reset written in flame and sorrow. And as the light spread, so too did the dream of Ooo. Across the continents, magic found its way into the smallest corners, into the cracks of abandoned houses, the hollows of trees, the depths of the ocean floor. It rewrote DNA, reshaped stone, and filled forgotten machines with a strange spark of life. The boundary between what was alive and what was not began to dissolve. The world, in a strange and gentle way, began to imagine itself. And in that dream, fragments of the old melody continued to hum. They drifted through the air like lullabies carried on the wind. Somewhere deep beneath the candy soil, the foundations of the Candy Kingdom began to stir. Elsewhere, the first fires of the Fire Kingdom flickered in volcanic veins, whispering their own verses of the world's new song. Time, still fragile and unformed, wove around these newborn kingdoms like silk. Days and nights were soft and uncertain, blending into one another. The world was still learning its rhythm, its heartbeat. In that quiet newness, Simon wandered not yet the Ice King, not yet the myth he would become, but the last witness of the old era. Sometimes, when he looked out across the endless snow, he thought he could see shadows moving in the distant shapes of what was to come. A boy with a golden sword, a girl made of gum, a vampire with music in her heart. They were only outlines then, still unborn, still waiting in the folds of time. But he felt them faintly, like echoes of dreams not yet dreamt. One night Simon rested beneath a frozen arch of ice that sparkled like starlight. The crown's glow dimmed, peaceful now, as though satisfied that its song had been heard. In the stillness, Simon closed his eyes and whispered the melody that had haunted him since before the end. It came easily now, slow, soft, familiar. It was the same melody the radio tower had once broadcast, the same that hummed through the earth before it broke open, the same that would one day echo in the background of Oo's laughter, in the wind that carried Marceline's songs, in the warmth of Jake's dreams. It was the song before the Mushroom War, the lullaby that bridged destruction and creation. Simon's voice trembled as he sang it, the sound dissolving into the night. The aurora above shimmered brighter, responding to his words, carrying them upward until the sky itself seemed to hum in harmony. He didn't know it then, but that song would never truly fade. It would weave through the ages, hidden in the hum of elemental magic, in the rise and fall of kingdoms, in the dreams of adventurers yet to come. When at last he fell asleep, his breath became frost that glowed faintly blue. The snow around him curved gently, almost protectively, as if the new world was cradling its last human dreamer. And so the old world slept, and Ooo began to sing. The melody traveled on, carried by wind, by time, by the quiet pulse of a living planet. It would never be recorded, never written down, but it would live forever in ice and candy and flame and song. And if you listen closely, even now, you might still hear it faintly beneath the hum of the universe. The song that started it all. The song before the Mushroom War. When the world of Ooo had grown into its strange new rhythm, when magic had settled into the soil and the sweetness of life filled the air, there came a night unlike any other. It was soft and still, draped in pastel twilight. The stars above the Candy Kingdom glimmered faintly, their reflections dancing on the pink sugar walls below. But beneath that calm glow, something unseen was stirring. The Candy Kingdom, usually alive with chatter and laughter, was quiet. The streets, usually dusted with the warm scent of caramel, were hushed. Peppermint Butler had noticed at first a peculiar silence settling over the realm, as though every candy person had collectively taken one long breath and forgotten to let it out. Princess Bubblegum was awake, of course. She often was, long after her citizens had gone to sleep. In her lab, the gentle hum of machinery filled the air, the rhythm of her thoughts matching the soft ticking of instruments. Her hands moved with precision, but her mind was far away, wandering through calculations, through memories, through fears she could never quite silence. She had been noticing strange readings for weeks. The scanners that monitored the kingdom's energy output, those gentle, glowing panels that kept track of every heartbeat, every sugar molecule, were showing erratic fluctuations. Some nights the readings spiked without reason, as though the Candy Kingdom itself was dreaming. And on this night, as she studied the glowing data, she realized the pattern wasn't random. It was rhythmic, a pulse. Every few seconds, the entire kingdom seemed to thrum, faintly in unison. It was as if the very walls, the cobblestones, even the air between the candy houses were breathing together. It wasn't dangerous, not yet, but it was deeply strange, almost organic, like the kingdom was alive in ways she hadn't intended. Bubblegum leaned back from her desk, staring at the monitor's steady glow. She whispered softly to herself, a thought she would never repeat aloud. "Are you dreaming, my sweet people?" Outside her window, the sky was a pale pink, streaked with sugar clouds that never seemed to move. The night was neither dark nor bright, caught in a permanent dusk, a kind of serene stillness that made time feel uncertain. And then slowly the pulse stopped. Bubblegum froze. Every machine in her lab went silent. The monitors dimmed, the hum of the air vents ceased. Even the faint background buzz of life in the kingdom, the laughter, the footfalls, the distant rustle of candy wrappers vanished completely. She stood, her heart thudding against the quiet. "Hello?" she called softly, her voice almost fragile in the emptiness. No answer. She stepped outside. The cool air met her like a sigh. The streets were empty, though the lights still glowed in the candy cottages. The doors were ajar, and inside she could see the candy people frozen mid-motion. A gumball guardian stood still beside the gate, eyes dim, arm half raised, as if it had been waving at someone. Peppermint Butler was paused beside the fountain, his hand extended toward a book that hovered in the air, caught in the middle of a fall. It was as if the entire kingdom had been caught in a single frame of time. Bubblegum's first instinct was to check for contamination, a chemical reaction, a magical surge, something tangible. But as she reached for her scanner, she noticed something strange. The air wasn't still. It was heavy, dense, humming faintly. A deep resonance pressed against her ears, too low to be a sound, too alive to be silence. She recognized that feeling, though she couldn't quite place it. It reminded her of something ancient, something that didn't belong to candy or science, something that pulsed beneath the surface of Ooo itself. She whispered, "This isn't a malfunction." Above her, the stars flickered, dimming one by one until the sky looked almost hollow. It was as though the universe had taken its light away just for a moment to see what would happen. She turned toward the palace, the sugar towers glowing faintly from within. Every step she took echoed too loudly, the sound bouncing back to her as if the air itself were enclosed, like the inside of a dream. Inside the grand hall, the chandeliers of rock candy hung motionless. The banners didn't sway. Even the candle flames were frozen mid-flicker, caught in impossible stillness. She moved between them, her footsteps the only motion in a kingdom of statues. Her mind raced through every possible explanation: temporal freeze spell, parallel dimension interference, mass magical stasis. But each theory fell apart the more she observed. This wasn't a spell. This was sleep. The Candy Kingdom wasn't frozen and was dreaming. She could feel it now in the air, in her bones. A deep vibration beneath everything, like a sleeping heart beneath the floor. When she placed her hand on the candy wall, she felt it thrum faintly, one slow, gentle pulse, as though the entire kingdom was breathing through her touch. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The air shifted, and she heard a whisper. Not words, not exactly, but a melody. A soft, low lullaby rising from the walls themselves. Bubblegum froze, listening. It was faint but unmistakable. The tune was the same one she had heard once in a dream, the song before the Mushroom War. Bubblegum stood still, her breath caught in the sweet, syrupy air. The melody was faint, almost hidden beneath the hum of silence. Yet she knew it wasn't her imagination. It was too familiar, too ancient. The same quiet song that echoed through the heart of Ooo itself. Her eyes softened as she listened. Each note seemed to rise from the sugar walls, from the ground, from the hearts of her people, or perhaps from something older, something beneath them all. The kingdom wasn't dead or malfunctioning. It was dreaming, and in that dream, it was remembering. She whispered, "You're remembering something that came before." For a moment, she forgot to be afraid. The melody wrapped around her like warmth. It wasn't sad, not exactly. More like a longing sigh from a world that once was. Bubblegum walked deeper into the palace, her footsteps quiet against the candy-tiled floor. As she passed, the lights flickered faintly, each one blinking in rhythm with the soft pulse she could still feel through her fingertips. It was as though the kingdom was alive, beating faintly in its sleep. She followed the sound to the throne room. The great double doors creaked as she pushed them open, though she knew she had built them never to move unless commanded. Inside, the throne stood empty, her place of rule untouched. Yet around it the walls seemed to glow faintly, threads of sugar light crawling like veins across their surface. The melody came stronger here, echoing in soft waves. Bubblegum stepped forward and sat at the foot of her throne. She let her head rest against the cool sugar stone and closed her eyes. The air shimmered faintly around her, and for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to simply listen. As she did, visions began to drift across her mind, not sharp or defined, but hazy and sweet, like fragments of someone else's dream. She saw the old world again, but not as history had shown it. Not in fire and ruin, but in light and sound. She saw humans walking beneath tall buildings made of glass, their laughter echoing, faintly laughter, that carried the same rhythm as this melody. She saw a scientist with kind eyes studying crystals that hummed faintly, a soft blue glow reflecting off his glasses. And then she saw a child, small, curious, tracing constellations on the ceiling while humming a tune she now realized had never stopped playing. Bubblegum opened her eyes. Her voice came out as a whisper. "You're not just dreaming. You're remembering the world that sang before you were born." The idea made something ache quietly in her chest. She had built the Candy Kingdom from her own body, from her own essence, believing she had created life. But maybe she hadn't created anything. Maybe she had simply continued, carried the melody forward into a new form. Outside, the night deepened. The stars blinked faintly, returning one by one, but their light wasn't steady. They flickered in rhythm with the same pulse that flowed through her kingdom, like a cosmic heartbeat sinking to the dream below. Bubblegum rose and walked to the balcony overlooking the entire city. The candy streets glowed softly, painted in hues of pink and amber from the lanterns that still burned without flame. Her people stood where they had frozen, serene, eyes closed, faces peaceful. It was eerie and beautiful all at once, an entire civilization asleep and dreaming together. She spoke quietly into the night. "What are you showing me?" At first there was no answer. Then the air changed. A breeze moved through the stillness, though there was no wind in Ooo that night. It carried a scent faint vanilla, touched with something older, something like snow. And beneath that she heard a voice. It was soft, distant, barely formed from sound, a whisper of emotion, more than words. "You are not the first dream, Bonnie Belle." Her heart skipped. The voice was gentle, familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. She looked up at the sky, but there was no figure, no source. Only the vast, cotton candy horizon and the faint shimmer of aurora spilling across the stars. "You are the echo of the song that never ended," it continued. "Even sweetness remembers sorrow, even creation dreams of its beginning." The words faded into the hum of the kingdom, but their meaning lingered. Bubblegum stood very still, the breeze tugging softly at her hair. The melody continued, woven to every corner of her world. For the first time, she wondered whether she had truly built her people, or whether she had simply given form to something that had been waiting to exist again. The thought filled her with wonder and unease. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the pulse changed. It slowed, then quickened, then slowed again. Like the breath of someone stirring from deep sleep, a soft light rippled across the streets, touching each candy citizen in turn. Their eyes flickered faintly beneath closed lids, as though they were dreaming of something bright. Bubblegum reached toward them, her voice trembling. "Wake up." And the kingdom began to answer. Light spread slowly, like dawn filtering through the syrup glass. It moved through every building, every sweet-shaped spire, every cobblestone infused with her essence. The glow wasn't harsh, it pulsed gently, almost shyly, as if the kingdom itself was deciding whether it was ready to awaken. Bubblegum watched as the first of her people stirred. Peppermint Butler's eyes fluttered open, but they didn't focus right away. For a moment, he seemed caught between two worlds, his candy-striped face lit by the warm, pulsing light. He didn't speak. Instead, he simply looked up as though listening to something far above them both. And in that moment, Bubblegum realized the melody hadn't stopped. It was just quieter now, woven to the air like a breath. The kingdom wasn't breaking free from the dream. It was carrying the dream into waking life. "Princess," Peppermint Butler whispered, his voice small but steady. Did you hear it too?" Bubblegum nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure how to explain what had happened. How could she? The experience hadn't been logical or scientific. It was older than those words. "Yes," she said softly. "I think it's been here all along." He blinked slowly. "It wasn't a dream, was it?" She looked out across her city, where other candy citizens were beginning to stir. Their eyes opened one by one, gentle and unfocused, filled with something like wonder. They didn't speak, not yet. Some smiled faintly, others simply stood still, as though savoring a memory they couldn't quite name. No," Bubblegum murmured. "It wasn't a dream." Above the kingdom, the sky shimmered faintly pink, clouds curling like spun sugar. The aurora she had seen earlier still danced at the horizon, its colors soft and tender, like the after-image of a song. She leaned on the balcony rail, watching her people slowly return to life. The hum of the kingdom, that deep, resonant pulse, remained steady beneath it all, but it had changed tone. It was no longer a lonely echo from the past. It sounded hopeful now, like a lullaby sung to itself. She thought about what the voice had said about echoes, about creation, dreaming of its beginning, and she realized that maybe this wasn't a warning at all. Maybe it was a reminder. Her people, her candy citizens, her perfect little kingdom, they weren't just the result of chemistry and design. They were part of something much larger, a continuation of the world's desire to remember itself, to rebuild through sweetness and joy what it had once lost to sorrow. And maybe that's why her creations had always seemed more alive than they should be, why their laughter carried a strange weight beneath it, and why their dreams sometimes hinted at things no one in Ooo should remember. Somewhere deep within the castle, the heartbeat of the kingdom grew stronger. The candy structures, the walls, the bridges, the roads, all seemed to hum faintly, like instruments tuning to the same note. Bubblegum could feel it in her bones. It was gentle, but vast, like being inside the chest of a sleeping god, listening as it slowly began to breathe again. She turned to Peppermint Butler, who was still staring toward the horizon. "What do you think it means?" He hesitated, his expression uncharacteristically calm. "It means something ancient remembers us, and it's happy." That made her smile, a quiet, uncertain smile. There were few moments in her long life when Bubblegum felt the weight of everything she'd done, the mistakes, the loneliness, the constant effort to hold her world together. But tonight, beneath that soft pulse of light, she felt something close to peace. Maybe she didn't have to fight against the strangeness of Ooo. Maybe she was part of it, the same song that sang through ice and fire, through candy and stars. In the distance, a tower of rock glowed faintly. For a second, it looked almost like a crown, its shape reflecting the same rhythm as the light in her kingdom. She didn't know if it was real or just a trick of her tired eyes, but it filled her with a sense of connection, a thread tying her kingdom to something ancient, something beyond comprehension. The melody quieted further, soft as a sigh. The citizens blinked awake, looking around, confused but unharmed. They began speaking gently to one another, checking their surroundings, as though emerging from a long, peaceful sleep. Bubblegum stepped away from the balcony and placed her hand on the cool, glowing wall beside her. The light under her palm pulsed, once bright, warm, and then stilled. "Thank you," she whispered. The castle gave a faint tremor, almost like a heartbeat in reply. And then, for the first time since the beginning of the night, true silence returned, not the kind of silence that felt wrong or hollow, but one that carried comfort, the silence that comes after a song ends, when the world takes a deep breath and simply rests. Bubblegum turned back toward the dawn beginning to creep across the horizon. The sky glowed soft gold now, blending into the pink of her city below. Everything smelled of sugar and dew, fragile and new. And in the distance she thought she heard it again, the faintest echo of that ancient song, fading but never gone. It came not from the walls this time, nor from the heart of the Candy Kingdom. It drifted through the open sky, carried by a wind that felt far too gentle to belong to any storm. The melody seemed to skip across the air, brushing through her hair and lingering like a memory against her skin. Bubblegum stepped out onto the edge of the balcony, squinting toward the horizon. The light was spreading now, faint, pearlescent, as if the very world was beginning to wake from the same shared dream. It rippled across the sugar hills, touching every glazed rooftop and soft gumdrop street. Even the air seemed alive with glittering particles, like pollen from a world that had never known decay. The hum beneath her feet softened, now rhythmic and calm. It reminded her of a heartbeat, steady and familiar. The Candy Kingdom had fallen asleep not out of malfunction or magic gone wrong, but because something deep within its being had needed to remember. She closed her eyes again, letting the thoughts settle. For all her genius, For all the formulas and equations that had kept her world running, she realized she had never truly listened. She had built a civilization, yes, but she had never asked what it wanted to be. Tonight, for the first time, the Candy Kingdom had answered her in its own quiet language. Her mind drifted back to the voice that had whispered through the stillness. "You are the echo of the song that never ended." The words replayed, soft as sugar melting on the tongue. Perhaps the Candy Kingdom's dream had not been unique. Perhaps all of Ooo, every land, every creature still carried fragments of that same universal song, the one Simon had heard before the end, before the skies burned and the ocean sang. As the first light of morning reached her, she wondered if somewhere far away another heart was stirring to the same rhythm. Maybe in the Ice Kingdom, the sound of wind through the frost carried the same melody in a slower, colder key. Maybe the Flame Kingdom burned to it, wild and hot. Maybe the stars above Ooo blinked in tune, distant yet bound to the same pulse. She smiled faintly at the thought. The world was vast, filled with magic and mystery, and yet tonight it all felt small, as if the entire land of Ooo had curled up together in a single shared dream. Peppermint Butler approached quietly, his cane clicking against the tile. "Princess," he said softly, "it's almost morning. Should we resume normal operations?" Bubblegum turned toward him, her expression unreadable at first, then softened by a small nod. "Yes," she whispered. "Let them wake naturally. Don't rush it." He bowed and turned to leave, but she stopped him with a quiet voice. "Peppermint," she said, if you ever hear that song again, don't be afraid of it." He paused, glancing back. "Afraid? No, Princess. I think it was beautiful. It felt like being remembered." That word lingered as he left, remembered. When the last of the citizens finally awoke, they had no memory of falling asleep at all. To them, it was simply another peaceful morning in the Candy Kingdom. But beneath their cheerful chatter and laughter, Bubblegum noticed something new, a softness in their tone, a warmth in their smiles, as though each one carried a piece of the dream with them. She watched them from her window, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps they wouldn't remember what had happened in words, but they would remember in spirit. And that was enough. The candy trees outside swayed gently in the morning breeze, their sugary leaves catching the first light. The hum beneath the kingdom faded to a calm silence, but now and then, if she listened very closely, she could still hear that faint, faraway melody, like the heartbeat of the world itself still singing softly beneath it all. And as the day began anew, the Candy Kingdom stood bathed in sunlight, fresh and alive, yet quietly changed. A place that had dreamed of the old world and woken to find itself more real than before. In the corners of her mind, Princess Bubblegum wondered if this was what Simon had felt, that thin line between science and magic, logic and wonder, the realization that perhaps the two had never been separate at all. She placed a hand over her chest, feeling the faint echo of the pulse beneath her skin, the same rhythm that had stirred her people and her kingdom. The kingdom had not merely slept. It had remembered the lullaby that built the bones of the world. And in that remembrance, something ancient had smiled. For a long while, Bubblegum simply stood at her window, watching the city come back to life. The candy citizens moved slowly, almost reverently, as though they too sensed that something sacred had happened during the night. Their laughter was quieter, softer, not out of fear, but out of awe. It was the kind of laughter that followed a beautiful dream one didn't want to wake from too quickly. Lemongrab, ever loud, was the first to notice her presence. "Princess!" he called, his sharp voice echoing through the courtyard. But even he, usually bursting with shrill authority, seemed uncertain. "Something feels different. The air is acceptable." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. It's a new day, Lemon Crab. Let's not analyze it too much. He blinked, sniffed the air, then nodded though he didn't understand. None of them did. But she didn't need them to. It was enough that they were here, awake and safe. As she walked through the streets, her people bowed or waved, their candy faces bright with childlike relief. They thought the night had passed uneventfully. None of them seemed aware that, for a few quiet hours, their hearts had been part of something much larger, something older than the Candy Kingdom itself. And maybe that was how it should be. Some truths were too heavy to carry while awake. Some dreams were meant only to be felt. She passed the Gumball Guardians, still standing like monuments at the edge of the plaza. Their massive candy eyes glowed faintly, as though still holding the last shimmer of the dream's light. When she looked closely, she swore she could see faint symbols pulsing within those eyes, complex, fractal shapes that no mortal hand had ever carved. Runes of an older tongue, perhaps, left behind by the same song that had once built worlds. She raised her hand to one of them, brushing her palm across its smooth surface. "You heard it too, didn't you?" she whispered. The Guardian made no sound, but for a moment she felt warmth through the sugar shell, a pulse, slow and deep, matching her own. It was all the answer she needed. The air was still scented with sweetness, but it carried something else now, something faintly metallic, ancient, almost like the smell of frozen iron. A reminder, perhaps, that not all dreams are born from sugar and song. Some are carried from much further away. She turned her gaze skyward. The aurora had vanished with the sunrise, but the sky itself still shimmered faintly, like a curtain of sugar glass, hiding something immense behind it. She could almost imagine the light humming, still faintly singing that same melody, one that had stretched across eons, from the last days of the old world to the first dawn of Ooo. And she realized then that the Candy Kingdom was not the only place that had heard the song. Somewhere far away, in the forests or beneath the waves, others might have felt it too. Other kingdoms stirred by dreams they couldn't explain. Magic had always been the lifeblood of Ooo, but now she understood that it wasn't chaos or coincidence. It was memory. Every spell, every creature, every kingdom was a verse in the same endless lullaby. Bubblegum smiled faintly, feeling the weight of that understanding settle into her bones. "We're all still part of it," she murmured. "The song hasn't ended. We're just its next refrain." Peppermint Butler approached her once again, holding a small data tablet in his hands. "Princess," he said, "I've analyzed the readings from last night. The energy surge was unlike anything in our archives. Organic, harmonic, and—" he hesitated, searching for the right word. "Alive." She looked down at the tablet, but she didn't need to see the data to know he was right. "That's because it was never an anomaly," she replied softly. "It was a heartbeat." He gave a slow, knowing smile, the kind of look that said he understood more than he would ever admit aloud. "Then perhaps it's time to listen more often." Bubblegum nodded, her eyes drifting back toward the horizon. The light there was shifting again, glowing faintly gold where the sun rose beyond the cotton fields. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something else in outline, a silhouette, distant and human-shaped, standing at the edge of dawn. But when she blinked, it was gone. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, had been watching the Candy Kingdom that night. Perhaps the same presence that had whispered to her from the air, reminding her of the song. She took one last look across her city before turning toward the laboratory. Work would resume soon, and life would continue as it always had. But deep down, she knew that nothing was truly the same. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in her kingdom, but in her understanding of what it meant to create. Because creation, she now knew, was not invention. It was memory given form. The Candy Kingdom had not merely been built, It had remembered itself into being. And as she walked through the sugar halls, she could still feel it, the faint pulse of that buried melody thrumming quietly in the walls in her own heart. And in the endless sweetness of the world she called home. Far beyond the city, as sunlight touched the frost-tipped peaks of the Ice Kingdom, the same note stirred faintly beneath the snow. The world was still dreaming, wide awake, yet never quite done remembering. The Candy Kingdom had slept. But the song of Ooo was only beginning to sing again. The quiet hours of the nightosphere's edge, the hour when shadows grow long and the moonlight turns the color of deep wine. Somewhere far above the sleeping forests of Ooo, a soft hum floats through the air, part lullaby, part memory. It's coming from a small cave carved into the cliffside, where a lone vampire queen lies in restless sleep. Marceline rarely dreams. When she does, her dreams are strange, stitched together from half-remembered centuries. Sometimes she dreams of her father's realm, of the swirling crimson sky, and the smell of brimstone mixed with the candy fruit. Other times she dreams of music, old tunes from before the war, when the world was still human enough to ache in familiar ways. But tonight's dream feels different. It begins with silence, the kind of silence that's too heavy, too aware. When she opens her eyes, she's not in her cave anymore. She's standing in front of a mirror, tall, oval, and framed in black stone. The glass isn't normal. It shimmers like the surface of a deep pool, and her reflection moves just slightly out of sync with her. Her own voice echoes faintly from within it. "Hey," it says softly, "do you remember what you looked like before?" Marceline frowns, stepping closer. Her reflection is smiling, not cruelly, but knowingly, as if it remembers something she's forgotten. Her hair is longer in the reflection, darker. Her eyes are human again. She can see the faint outline of her old clothes, torn denim, an old red shirt with a faded design from a band that doesn't exist anymore. The mirror hums faintly, and the world around her shifts. Suddenly, she's standing in a ruined city, skyscrapers bent like old bones, lights flickering behind cracked windows. The sky above glows dark red, and the air hums with distant, broken music, an old tune she used to play with her bass guitar when she was still finding her voice. She realizes she's standing in the remains of a stage. A half-broken microphone leans on its stand, and her guitar, her old beloved axe bass, rests nearby, glowing faintly with a heartbeat of its own. "Am I dreaming?" she whispers. The reflection steps out of the mirror then, silent as shadow, her feet not touching the cracked floor. She looks just like Marceline, but her colors are softer, her expression gentler. The kind of face that hasn't learned how to hide its pain yet. "You're remembering," the reflection said. "That's all dreaming really is." Marceline looks around, her chest tightening. "This was the night," she said. "The last night before." Her voice trails off, but the air finishes her sentence before everything changed. She remembers this place. The city that once had music, laughter, people dancing, even as the world began to end. She had played here once in a small underground bar filled with survivors. The stage had been low, the lights dim. She remembered the faces tired, hungry, scared but still swaying to her songs. Music had been all they had left. Now the dream had rebuilt it, not perfectly, but enough for her to feel the echo of that night. Her reflection walks toward the stage, brushing her fingers across the strings of the old guitar. The sound rings out, not bright and sharp, but hollow, as if the note had traveled too far through time. The red sky trembles slightly at the sound. "Why are you showing me this?" Marceline asks. Her reflection turns to her, eyes glinting softly. "Because you never let yourself rest. You keep singing to fill the silence, but you don't listen to what it's singing back." That confuses her. She frowns and looks around. "Singing back?" The reflection nods and gestures toward the horizon. There, through the haze of the ruined world, she can see faint figures, not human anymore, but made of light. drifting like dust motes. They're humming, the same melody she had played centuries ago, only slower, more mournful. Marceline's throat tightens. That's my song. Her reflection smiles. No, it's the world's song now. It remembered. The realization hits her quietly, like a wave of warmth and sorrow all at once. Every note she had ever played, every melody that had risen into the night air had never truly vanished. It had echoed. It had lingered. It had been absorbed into the hum of Ooo itself, joining the endless lullaby of the world that refused to die. Her music had become part of the same song that Simon once heard beneath the earth, the same resonance that pulsed through the Candy Kingdom's dreaming heart. The mirror shimmers again, and she feels herself being drawn toward it, as though the dream is pulling her deeper, not to trap her, but to show her what lies beneath the reflection. And for the first time in centuries, Marceline feels something she hasn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time, the fragile, trembling edge of hope. The red sky folds inward as if breathing. The ruined city begins to dissolve, each building melting into streaks of light that rise toward the mirror like threads being rewound. Marceline stands at the center of it all, the air vibrating softly around her. Every sound, the hum of wind, the faint echo of her song feels alive, deliberate. The reflection reaches out a hand. "Do you remember why you started playing?" it asks gently. Marceline hesitates. "Because I was alone," she says finally. Music was the only thing that still listened. The reflection nods. It still listens. The glass ripples again, and this time it doesn't show the city. It shows a small, dimly lit living room, a worn couch, a blanket draped over the arm, a little girl, her curled up with a toy in her hands, watching the glow of a television that no longer works. Beside her, a man sits cross-legged, reading quietly. His glasses catch the light. Simon. The image stings like memory made physical. She steps closer, reaching out, but her fingers only touch the surface of the mirror. The reflection stands beside her, watching too. "You've dreamed of him before," it says softly. "Every night," Marceline murmurs. "But this feels different. It's too clear." He's part of the song, too," the reflection replies. "He heard it before anyone. You carried it after he forgot it." Marceline swallows hard. The Simon in the reflection turns a page in his book, then looks up, smiling faintly as though he can sense her. He looks tired, gentle, real. She can almost hear his voice again, that calm tone that always carried a thread of melancholy. The way he said her name, like a promise that things would be okay. The scene begins to flicker, and her chest aches. "Don't go," she whispers. But the reflection doesn't move to stop it. "You're not losing him," it says. "You're remembering him the way the world remembers you. Every note you ever played was a way of keeping him alive." The glass trembles and shatters outward into crimson light. The shards hang in the air around her, each one reflecting a different memory, moments from centuries ago, frozen mid-breath. She sees her first song after the Mushroom War, sung to a handful of survivors who didn't yet know what the world had become. She sees herself playing by candlelight in a ruined shop, her guitar echoing off broken walls. She sees laughter, tears, lonely nights that still somehow felt full because of the music that filled them. Each shard hums faintly with its own note, and together they weave a quiet harmony that settles deep into her chest. Marceline closes her eyes. She can feel it now, the pulse beneath the dream. The same pulse that Simon once wrote about in his journal. The same hum that had rocked the Candy Kingdom into its mysterious slumber. The heartbeat of a world remembering itself through sound. When she opens her eyes, the reflection has changed again. It's still her, but not young or old, not vampire or human, just her, stripped of all the labels that centuries had layered over her name. You're not separate from the song, it says. You're one of its oldest verses. That thought feels both comforting and heavy. Then what happens when it stops? Marceline asks. The reflection smiles faintly. It never stops. It only changes key. The world around her brightens. The broken sky folds into light. The ruins vanish completely, and all that remains is the mirror now, a pool of still red glass at her feet. She looks down and sees not her reflection this time, but the faint ripple of the stars above Ooo. She realizes with a soft breath that she's standing at the edge of the real world again, her own cave. The moonlight faintly red through the window. But the hum hasn't gone. It lingers in the silence of her home, in the faint vibration of her guitar leaning against the wall. It's still there, whispering, waiting to be played again. Marceline steps closer to her instrument and runs her fingers across the strings. The sound that fills the air isn't quite music, it's gentler, like the sound of memory breathing. She plays a single note, and for a moment, she swears she hears it echo back from far away, faint, delayed, as if the world itself were answering. The dream hasn't ended at all. It simply moved into waking life. When the morning light fully enters the cave, it moves across the stone like liquid gold. The shadows retreat into corners, and Marceline's home awakens gently the way an old house sighs when sunlight returns after a long night. Her eyes flutter open, but for a moment she's uncertain whether she's still dreaming. The silence carries the same weight as the dream did, calm and full of presence. She sits up slowly, brushing her hair back, her gaze drifting toward the guitar resting beside her. It feels different now, not just an instrument, but something sacred, something alive. When she touches it, the wood is warm, humming faintly, as though it's still resonating with the song from the night before. She thinks about the mirror, the reflection, the red light that had surrounded her. It no longer feels ominous. It feels like an old memory that finally made sense. Maybe the dream wasn't about warning her of something. Maybe it was about reminding her of what she already carried. Outside, the world hums softly, too. The air smells of damp moss and wildflowers growing over the ancient ruins of the old city. A world that had seen so much ending, yet somehow still found ways to begin again. Marceline walks to the edge of her cave and looks out across the valley. The river below glints faintly, catching the early light. She thinks of all the songs she's written over the centuries, some born of sorrow, others of joy, and most out of that quiet space in between. Each one had been a reflection of her, of Ooo, of time itself. The red mirror had simply shown her that the world listens back. As she stands there, a memory surfaces of when she was still young, her fangs barely grown, the world still smoldering from the Mushroom War. She remembers singing to empty streets, to no one at all, and yet feeling heard. Back then, she thought she was imagining it. But now she understands the earth had always been listening. Every sound, every story, every song becomes part of its memory. The same hum she'd heard in her dream is here, too, in the whisper of the trees, in the flutter of a passing bird, in the soft rhythm of the stream below. The world is singing back. She smiles faintly and begins to hum again, softly, wordlessly, just letting the sound flow. The valley carries her melody outward, letting it drift and mix with the morning. Somewhere far away it will fade, but not disappear. It will simply become part of the endless, quiet song of the world. As the sun rises higher, she feels that same warm pulse in her chest again, a subtle echo of connection, of something larger than her. Maybe, she thinks, that's what the dream wanted her to remember. Not that the past haunts her, but that it sings with her. She returns inside, where the candle from the night before has burned down to wax and wick. She kneels beside it, traces the rim of the melted pool with her finger, and whispers, "Thank you." Her voice barely disturbs the air, but it feels like a completion. The dream has closed its circle. Then, on impulse, she reaches for her journal, the one she hasn't written in for a long time. The pages are filled with fragments of songs, sketches of places long gone, notes about dreams and strange phenomena across Ooo. She opens to a blank page and begins to write, "Last night, I dreamed in red. The mirror showed me a song that existed before I ever touched a string. I think it's the sound that keeps the world turning. I think it's love, hidden as vibration." She stops for a moment, smiling at how simple it sounds, but the truth of it feels real. Then she writes another line. "If anyone ever finds this, listen closely at night. The world hums when you're quiet enough to hear it." She closes the journal gently, placing it beside the candle. The small gesture feels ceremonial, a way to anchor the dream in the waking world. By the time she steps back outside, the morning has fully blossomed. Sunlight pools across the rocks, and the sky holds a gentle blue. There's no trace of crimson now, no reflection, no strange vibrations, only peace. And yet when she exhales, she feels the faint hum beneath her breath. It moves with her heartbeat, a reminder that the dream never really ended. As she walks toward the edge of the forest, her shadow long and soft against the grass, she hums the melody once more, the song that has no beginning, no end, only a pulse that threads through every living thing. It feels right that no one else is there to hear it. Some songs aren't meant to be shared loudly. They're meant to be felt in silence, like the memory of a dream that stays behind after waking. The forest listens, and somewhere within its quiet, a response stirs a gentle vibration, carried on the wind. The world, it seems, is humming back in harmony. Marceline smiles, her eyes half closed, the hum settling deep into her. For the first time in a long while, she feels completely at peace. The red mirror, the song, the dream, they were never separate stories. They were one melody sung across time. And as she disappears into the brightening forest, that melody continues, unseen but eternal, humming beneath the surface of Ooo, the dream song of a world that never stopped listening. To a place whispered about in only the oldest corners of Oo's memory. A place that doesn't appear on any map, nor in any tale that was ever written down. It's called the Library at the Edge of Ooo, though even that name feels too small for what it truly is. Imagine a horizon that never ends, a flat stretch of white stone and dust where the world itself seems to fade into the mist. At first glance, it looks empty, nothing but silence and pale light. But if you listen closely, you might hear a soft fluttering sound like the wings of birds or the pages of 1,000 books turning at once. That's how travelers have described it. A place where knowledge breathes. They say the library exists where the stories of the world go when they're forgotten. Every song never sung, every legend half remembered, every page that burned away in some long-lost war, they find their way here. Not as words exactly, but as fragments of thought, of memory, of feeling. Some believe that the library is alive, that it grows like a forest, sprouting new shells whenever the world dreams a new story. Others say it's older than time itself, built by beings who wanted to keep the universe from losing its own history. There are even rumors that the cosmic owl visits sometimes, gliding silently between the aisles, collecting forgotten dreams. The library doesn't have walls in the way you might imagine. Its shelves rise from the ground like the trunks of trees, endless and winding. Each one hums softly, as if the knowledge inside is sleeping, waiting to be woken by a reader's hand. The air smells faintly of dust, and something sweet, maybe paper, maybe time. No one really knows who the librarian is. Some say it's a machine made of ink and gears, others that It's a ghost who once loved books so much that it refused to leave them behind. There's even an old Candy Kingdom bedtime story that says Princess Bubblegum once met the librarian herself. In that tale, she journeyed to the Edge of Ooo in search of answers about pre-war science, how humanity once built and destroyed with the same hand. The story goes that she found the library after walking for 7 nights through the whispering desert, following the sound of turning pages that never stopped. When she finally stepped inside, she didn't find a person waiting for her, but a mirror made of ink. The mirror spoke, though it had no mouth. It asked her a single question. What do you seek, knowledge or truth? And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Knowledge can fill your mind, but truth fills your soul. The library at the Edge of Ooo guards both, but it will only give you one. The tale says Bubblegum hesitated before answering. Knowledge could help her rebuild her kingdom, keep her people safe, solve the riddles of her own existence. But truth could unravel everything she thought she knew. The ink in the mirror began to ripple as she stood there. In its surface, she saw flashes the Candy Kingdom, rising from the ruins, the faces of her subjects, the empty laboratories deep beneath her castle, where ancient machines still hummed with post-war energy. Finally, she spoke. I seek truth. The mirror smiled, not in a human way, but like ink blooming across paper. And then it shattered into 1,000 droplets that swirled around her, whispering in voices she didn't understand. When they settled, a single book lay open on the ground before her. It was blank. Every page pure white, except for a single line written at the very end. The truth is the story you continue to write. Bubblegum took the book back to her kingdom, and though she never spoke of it again, those close to her noticed she changed after that journey. She began recording everything, not just her experiments, but her thoughts, her dreams, her doubts. Perhaps she realized that the library wasn't a place of answers, but of reminders that the act of remembering, of writing, of preserving, is what keeps the truth alive. And so the library at the Edge of Ooo remains, waiting quietly for those who are brave enough to seek it. Some say if you stand perfectly still in a quiet place at night, you can hear it faintly, the sound of pages turning somewhere far beyond the horizon, keeping the world from forgetting itself. Yet the library isn't only a place of memory. It's also a place of choices, of reflections. For what are stories, if not mirrors of who we are? They say that if you ever manage to reach the library at the Edge of Ooo, it doesn't appear all at once. Instead, it unfolds around you, like a dream remembering itself. First comes the light, soft, golden, and slow-moving, like sunlight through honey. Then the shelves rise one after another, climbing into an unseen ceiling. The floor forms last, built from tiles made of compressed parchment, smooth beneath your feet, but whispering faintly with every step. And then there's the sound, a gentle rustling, constant but never chaotic. It's the heartbeat of the library, millions of stories murmuring in their sleep. No one walks in through a door. The library invites rather than allows. It finds those who need it, the wanderers burdened by memory, the seekers who've forgotten what they're looking for. It's said that when you've carried a question too long, the library opens its pages to you. One such wanderer was Peppermint Butler. This was long before he became known as the Candy Kingdom's darkly charming servant of arcane arts. Back then, he was simply curious, a young scholar obsessed with secrets that older, wiser beings told him not to pursue. He followed rumors through the wastelands, across frozen valleys, through forests that grew in impossible directions. Each night, he'd dream of pages fluttering open by themselves, their words rearranging like constellations. When he awoke one morning, he found himself standing at the library's threshold, though he didn't remember walking there. The place stretched endlessly before him, lit by floating orbs that glowed a gentle amber. He wandered through aisles upon aisles of books, scrolls, and things that weren't exactly either thoughts bound into shapes, shimmering like glass. Some shelves hummed low, others whispered names, a few even sighed, as if tired from remembering too much. He reached out and brushed his hand along the spine of a book that pulsed like a heartbeat. For an instant, the room shifted. The ceiling disappeared into the stars, and he saw flashes of Oo's earliest days when the land was still forming, raw and bright, when ancient magics and forgotten sciences mingled freely. Then he heard a voice, clear and echoing from every direction at once. "Reader," it said, calm and ancient, "why have you come?" Peppermint Butler turned slowly. No one stood there. Only a shape made of ink and light, tall, fluid, like smoke that had learned how to stand still. "I want to know," he answered carefully, "how it all began. The world, the magic, the end that came before the beginning." The figure tilted its head, a motion that rippled like water disturbed. "You seek what cannot be held," it said. "The beginning is not a point, but a song that keeps replaying. You are living within one of its verses." He frowned. "Then, can I hear the first note of it?" The librarian, if that's what it was, smiled faintly. "You already are." And then the library shifted again. The shelves bent, folded inward like waves, and Peppermint Butler was standing before a vast, circular pool of black ink. Its surface shimmered with reflections, moments, faces, fragments of history suspended in motion. He leaned closer and saw flashes of humans in lab coats, of towers rising before the war, of elemental spirits stirring beneath the crust of the earth. In the reflection, he also saw himself older, darker, holding powers he didn't yet understand. His reflection smiled knowingly, though his real self did not. Peppermint Butler drew back, unsettled. "Is this the future?" The librarian's voice came again, softer this time. "It is what you will remember when all else is gone." He didn't understand then, but in time he would. The library doesn't show the future or the past. It shows the truths that exist between them. Those quiet, in-between moments where choice and consequence blur together, where identity begins to echo beyond time. As he left, the book seemed to whisper after him. Some called his name, others laughed softly like children at play. He never found the entrance again. But from that day on, his eyes carried a certain knowing, as though every secret he pursued afterward was simply an echo of what he'd already seen. The library at the Edge of Ooo, in its strange compassion, never reveals more than one can bear. It doesn't punish or deceive, it teaches gently, through memory and mirror, reminding each visitor that knowledge is both gift and burden. And somewhere in its endless halls, the librarian keeps watch, turning pages that no one will ever see, ensuring that every story, even the forgotten ones, keeps breathing. Some say the library is not confined to the Edge of Ooo at all. It moves quietly, between realms, slipping through the folds of time like a dream passing from one sleeper to another. There are moments, whispered in legend, when it has appeared in the most unexpected places, a corner of the nightosphere where even demons speak in hushed tones, a clearing in the fire kingdom when the flames burned blue for a single night, or deep beneath the ocean, where the pages turned without air and the books were made of coral and light. But always its purpose remains the same, to hold the stories that the world has forgotten how to tell. Long after Peppermint Butler's visit, another traveler is said to have found her way there. This time, it was Marceline. Not in her early, lonely centuries, but much later after the world had quieted, after so many of her friends had faded into legend. She had stopped writing songs for a while, stopped performing. Her melodies, once her way of remembering, had begun to sound like ghosts to her. So she walked, not with a map or destination, but following a strange pull that tugged at her chest, a rhythm she could hear only in silence. The road led her through empty valleys and quiet forests, until one evening the light changed. It grew soft and golden, just as the stories had described, and the ground beneath her feet began to hum like the low note of a song. When she looked up, there it was, the library, waiting. The air felt warm and still. She could smell parchment and dust, but also something living underneath, something like breath. Inside, the shelves curved gently, each one glowing faintly from within. There were no footsteps echoing through the aisles, only the sound of pages turning somewhere far away. Marceline wandered through them slowly, her fingers grazing the edges of the books. Some spines pulsed faintly, others whispered her name. She stopped before a narrow shelf tucked between two pillars. A single book rested there, its cover deep red, its title written in letters that seemed to shift when she looked too long. She pulled it free and opened it carefully. The pages were blank until she touched them. Then faintly, words began to appear, drawn in dark ink that shimmered like music. The Song of the Red Mirror. Her breath caught. The title alone sent a shiver through her. She turned the page. The text unfolded like a melody written in words. It described a dream she had once had long ago of standing before a mirror that reflected her memories instead of her face. The words described things no one else could know, the way the air had smelled of rain, the sound of her heartbeat, the ache of missing Simone. "This is mine," she whispered. A voice answered softly, from somewhere deep within the shelves. Yes, it was never lost, only waiting to be read again. She looked up, and a figure emerged between the shelves, tall, pale, and faceless, its form made of faintly glowing ink, its edges blurred and rippled, as though it were being written and erased at the same time. "You're the librarian," Marceline said quietly. The figure inclined its head. Or perhaps just the idea of one. She closed the book gently. "Why do you have this? Why do you have my dream?" The librarian's voice carried no malice, only patience. "Because dreams are stories, too. They are the memories the waking world refuses to carry. When you forget them, they come here to rest." Marceline glanced down at the book again. The pages were turning themselves now, showing scenes from her long life, each moment rendered in delicate strokes of ink. Her first song, her first loss, the friends she'd made and outlived. Every memory carried a faint glow as though lit from within. "It's all still here," she murmured. "Yes," the librarian said, "because the world remembers through you. You are one of its storytellers." The words struck something deep within her. All at once, the quiet guilt she'd carried, the feeling of being the last verse of a fading song, softened. She wasn't the end of anything. She was the bridge between stories, a keeper of echoes. She asked the librarian, "Can I leave this here, the song I've been carrying?" The figure nodded. Every storyteller leaves something behind. She strummed a few soft notes on her bass, her fingers trembling slightly. The sound drifted through the aisles, weaving with the hum of the shelves until the whole library seemed to breathe with her. When she stopped, the book in her hands closed itself, and a faint red light pulsed across its cover, as though the song had been written into it. Marceline set it gently back on the shelf. "For whoever needs it next," she whispered. The librarian bowed its head. "It will be found when it's meant to be." And with that, the light began to fade. The shelves blurred at the edges, the air grew cool, and before she could take another breath, she found herself standing once more outside on the edge of the world, beneath a quiet sky. The library was gone, but when she strummed her bass again, the sound carried an echo she hadn't heard before, warm, deep, and full of memory. The library was still with her, hidden inside every note, every heartbeat. And far away, in the endless halls at the edge of Ooo, her book glowed faintly among countless others, one more story, sleeping peacefully, waiting for someone to dream it awake again. There are whispers that the library doesn't just hold stories from Ooo, but from every world that has ever touched it, every version of existence shaped by imagination, dream, or memory. Some shelves, it said, reach far beyond the stars, filled with tales of other realms entirely. Places where heroes never fell, where the Ice King never froze, where Finn never had to grow up. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That somewhere out there, every what-if we've ever imagined is already written down, safe and waiting. The library doesn't judge which story is true. It simply keeps them all, as though every possibility deserves its own quiet eternity. One such book, if you were to find it, is bound in seaweed and moonlight. The spine hums faintly like the ocean at night. It tells of a version of Ooo that never saw the Mushroom War, where humans and creatures lived side by side, and magic flowed like water through the soil. In that story, Marceline still plays her bass, but she's part of a small traveling band that wanders from kingdom to kingdom, playing for anyone who will listen. The Candy Kingdom is a place of music and laughter, ruled not by scientists or monarchs, but by dreamers. But then again, in another book nearby, Ooo doesn't even exist. The continents are different, the sky burns purple, and the air hums with strange mechanical life. And yet, the same themes repeat: friendship, loneliness, the quiet ache of memory. The stories mirror each other like reflections in a vast and endless hall of glass. It's said that if you listen closely in the library between the turning pages and the whispering ink, you can hear faint voices reading aloud from these books. Some belong to the long forgotten, some to those who haven't been born yet. Each word folds into the next, creating a sound that is neither language nor music, but something beautifully in between. One night, a traveler with a glass lantern came upon the library's outer walls. He claimed he saw the entire structure pulse like a heartbeat, as though it were alive. Inside, he found a book with no title at all. Its pages reflected his own life, every thought, every decision, every dream. And when he closed it, the words vanished, leaving only a single sentence on the final page: "To remember is to create again." He left without taking the book, but for years afterward, people swore they could see faint script glowing beneath his skin whenever moonlight touched it. Back in the library's endless aisles, the librarian moves quietly. Its ink-born fingers trail across the shelves as if checking on each slumbering story. Sometimes it stops before a book that trembles faintly, one being remembered somewhere in Ooo. When that happens, a soft, golden light spills across the floor, and the entire library seems to sigh, content. There is a shelf near the center where the books are bound in strange materials, fragments of dreams, echoes of laughter, shadows of tears. That is where the stories of those who've truly lived rest. Finn's tale, Jake's, Bubblegum's, Simon's, all of them, gently glowing, still being written, because they are not yet done. Some scholars of Ooo believe that when we dream, tiny pieces of our thoughts drift toward this library, adding new chapters to our stories. Perhaps that's why we sometimes wake with memories that don't quite belong to us, faces we've never met, songs we've never heard, places we've never seen. Maybe those are borrowed fragments, little gifts from the library at the edge of Ooo. Imagine standing there for a moment, the golden light wrapping around you, the air humming softly, every story ever told within reach. You'd see books fluttering their own pages open, inviting you in. Maybe one would call to you, whispering your name across time and space. If you reached for it, the ink would warm under your fingers, reshaping itself to fit your story. You might see glimpses of your life reflected on the pages, not exactly as it is, but as it could be. Not a record, but a possibility. And then, just when you'd begin to read, the library would fade, leaving you with a single sentence burned softly into your heart. Every story you tell keeps the world alive. When Peppermint Butler returned from his journey, he spoke little of what he'd found. But sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he would stare at the horizon with a knowing smile. He had written something down a story about a boy with a hat and a dog with a soul that stretched across the stars. He tucked it into the hidden places of the library, confident it would find its way back to the world when the time was right. And maybe that's what all of us are doing in our own quiet ways, writing our pages, leaving pieces of ourselves in the vast, unseen shelves of existence. Because somewhere beyond the edges of Ooo, in that gentle, golden light, the library is still there, turning its pages, humming softly, waiting for the next dreamer to find it. There's a story told quietly in the harbors of Ooo, passed between sailors who never look each other directly in the eye when they speak of it. It's about an ocean that once stretched endlessly across the land, before it began to lose itself wave by wave, until even its own name slipped away like foam in the tide. Old maps don't show it anymore. You can't find it in Bubblegum's archives or in Simon's weathered journals. But if you ask the merfolk in the distant southern reefs, or the fishermen who still set sail beneath the whispering moon, they'll tell you that there are nights when the sea forgets how to be water, when the waves still and the horizon folds inward, like a mirror losing its reflection. That's when you found the edge of the nameless ocean. Long ago, long before the kingdoms, before magic and technology had divided the world, this ocean was said to be alive, not in the way that rivers teem with fish or the air hums with energy, but in the truest, oldest sense. It knew things. It remembered the footsteps of giants who once walked the seafloor, the songs sung by the first humans as they sailed from the ruins of their world, and the shimmering shapes of creatures who no longer exist even in dreams. But something changed. Some say it was the Mushroom War, the great burning that reshaped the bones of the earth. Others say the ocean began to dream, and in doing so, forgot the difference between memory and reality. Whatever the cause, its surface became uncertain, its tides wandering. Names slipped away, first the names of its currents, then the names of its islands, and finally, its own. When sailors tried to cross it, they would sometimes return days later, unable to speak of where they'd been. Their eyes carried the reflection of waves that no longer matched any known sea. Some said they'd heard voices beneath the water, soft, familiar, like friends calling from long ago. Others claimed to have seen shapes rising from the depths, made not of flesh or coral, but of light, like ghosts remembering what it meant to be alive. Among those who sought the truth of the nameless ocean was Finn. This happened in one of those quiet gaps in his life after great battles, after the dust of adventure had settled. The world was changing again, slowly, softly, and he had begun to feel that same change within himself, a kind of restlessness, not for battle or heroism, but for understanding. He heard of the forgotten sea from a wandering mariner who sold maps that didn't line up with any known geography. The mariner's hands trembled when he unfolded the parchment. "It's a map that changes when you look away," he whispered. "A tide that remembers faces, but not names. If you follow it, boy, you'll reach the ocean that dreams of itself." Something in those words called to Finn maybe the same curiosity that once drew him into forests and ruins. Maybe something older, something that the Land of Ooo had placed in him long before he understood it. So one evening he set sail with only Jake by his side. The air was still, the sky a low shade of indigo. The waves beneath them seemed strangely quiet, as if listening. For days they drifted through calm waters, guided only by a compass that sometimes spun like a dizzy child and sometimes pointed true north with startling precision. Then one dawn, as the first light touched the water, they saw a stretch of sea that shimmered differently. The air above it rippled faintly, bending the sunlight like glass underwater. When Finn reached his hand into the surface, it didn't feel like water at all. It was warm, soft, and weightless, like touching a memory. Jake peered over the edge, his voice quiet. "Buddy, this water's thinking about something." Finn laughed softly, though the sound came out uneasy. "Yeah," he said. "I think it's trying to remember." They anchored their boat and waited, listening. The ocean was perfectly still. No wind, no sound of waves, only a faint hum, deep and resonant, as if the entire sea were breathing in its sleep. Then a voice, faint, far away, rising from beneath the surface. Not words at first, just a melody, familiar, comforting. Finn leaned closer, and it grew clearer. It was a lullaby, one he couldn't place, but somehow knew, like something his heart had memorized long ago. He closed his eyes, and suddenly he was standing on a shore that didn't exist, watching the ruins of a city sink beneath golden waves. He saw flashes, people running, machines breaking apart, the sky opening like a wound, then silence, a great stillness, the ocean covering it all as though to protect what remained. And when it did, it took with it not just the bodies and buildings, but the memory of what had happened. When Finn opened his eyes again, the world had changed. The sun was high, but the sky shimmered with faint lights, like stars beneath daylight. Jake was staring into the distance, his eyes wide and glassy. "Dude," he whispered, "I think it's showing us something that used to be." The ocean below them rippled faintly, like an old dream shifting in its sleep. The water around the boat began to glow faintly, threads of silver light weaving through the waves like veins beneath translucent skin. Finn knelt, dipping his fingers into the glow. For a brief moment, it wasn't water he felt at all. It was warmth, almost like holding someone's hand. The hum beneath the surface deepened, and from it rose the faintest echo of laughter, distant but soft, carried on the current of memory. Jake leaned over the edge, his brow furrowed. "It's like it's alive, but not in the usual way," he murmured. "Like it's dreaming about being alive." Finn watched the reflection of the sky ripple across the glowing waves. "What if that's exactly what it's doing?" he said. "What if it's remembering itself?" He had read once in one of Princess Bubblegum's scattered journals that certain bodies of water could absorb emotion, that over centuries the collective memory of those who sailed upon them could change their nature. Perhaps the nameless ocean had absorbed too much, the grief, the love, the fear of 1,000 years, until the weight of it all blurred its sense of self. As the glow brightened, images began to form in the reflection. A castle beneath the sea, built of coral and glass. Figures moved through its halls, not human, not exactly aquatic either, but beings of shifting light, their forms constant only in the rhythm of the waves. They moved with purpose, yet something about them felt sad, like ghosts reenacting a story they no longer understood. Finn felt the ache of it, that sense of loss without knowing what was lost. He could feel the ocean's sorrow pressing against him, like the hush that follows after a great storm. Jake placed a paw on his shoulder, grounding him. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "Don't get lost in it. You're still here, okay?" The air trembled faintly. The glow pulsed once and then again, like the beating of a distant heart. From beneath the surface, the melody returned clearer this time. Words formed softly, ancient and cracked by time, yet unmistakable. "We were the sea that remembered your names, Now we are the dream that forgot our own. Finn's breath caught. Jake, did you hear that? Jake nodded slowly, ears twitching. Yep, and I think it's singing to us, dude. The waves began to shift rhythmically, like the ocean, breathing in sync with its song. The sky dimmed slightly, and the horizon curved in on itself, bending in impossible ways. The world around them no longer felt stable, as if they'd drifted beyond the edges of a map and into something vast and sentient. Finn closed his eyes again and let the sound guide him. He saw visions of a time before the war, when the sea had a name. It had been called Aquilus, the eternal memory. It was said to be a keeper of stories, absorbing the echoes of every word spoken upon its surface. Travelers once came from faraway lands to whisper their farewells into its tide, trusting that the ocean would remember what they could not. But when the Mushroom War came, the world burned, and in the great trembling of the earth, Aquilus took in too much. Too much pain, too much noise. It filled with screams and silence until it could no longer tell one from the other. And so, like a heart overwhelmed by grief, it forgot its name to protect itself. When Finn opened his eyes, he could see that same grief reflected in the waves. "It's lonely," he whispered. "It's been alone for so long." Jake nodded slowly. "Makes sense. Everyone forgot it. Maybe that's why it's trying to reach out now." The hum deepened again, not frightening, but heavy, resonant, like the low tone of a giant bell beneath the world. The air shimmered, and droplets of water began to lift from the sea's surface, floating gently around them like pearls suspended in time. Within each droplet were tiny reflections, flickering scenes of Oo's past. Cities before the fall, families gathered on shores, children skipping stones across tides that once had names. Finn reached out to touch one. The droplet broke apart into mist, and with it came a flood of sensations: warmth, laughter, sunlight, the sound of a lullaby carried on sea breeze. He recognized none of it, yet it all felt achingly familiar. Then a voice different from the earlier song, softer, nearer. "Thank you," it said. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once, like the whisper of the tide itself. "For remembering." Finn looked out across the horizon. The glow began to fade now, settling into calm ripples of pale silver. "I don't think it wanted us to find it," he said quietly. "I think it just wanted to know that someone still cared it was here." Jake smiled faintly. "Well, mission accomplished, Ocean." For the first time in centuries, perhaps, the water rippled with something that looked like relief. The air around Finn and Jake softened, and the tension in the waves eased. The silver glow beneath the surface shimmered gently before fading into a pale blue calm. The ocean had quieted, as if it had finally taken a long, deep breath after years of holding one in. Finn sat cross-legged on the decks, staring into the horizon that now seemed endless and still. The light around them had taken on a dreamlike hue, neither dawn nor dusk, but something between. Time felt slower here, like it had forgotten how to pass properly. Jake stretched out beside him, paws tucked behind his head. "You ever think," he said lazily, "that maybe the ocean's kind of like us? Changes shape, forgets things, remembers others when it's ready?" Finn nodded, eyes tracing the delicate movement of the waves. "Yeah, I think so. Maybe everything in Ooo remembers in its own way, even the stuff that doesn't talk back." The ocean gave a gentle sigh, not a wave or a crash, but a subtle rise in the water, a kind of acknowledgement. For a fleeting moment, Finn thought he saw a faint figure beneath the surface. A woman's shape, formed entirely of light and tide. Her hair flowed like ribbons of moonlight, her eyes reflecting constellations he didn't recognize. She raised a hand, not beckoning, not warning, just greeting. Finn whispered softly, "Who are you?" The figure tilted her head, and though her lips never moved, Her voice resonated all around them. Once I was the sea mother, the first current, the memory keeper of a qualis. Her voice carried the texture of distant thunder softened by rain. I held every story spoken beneath my waves, every word whispered to the wind, every secret buried in the sand. But when the world fell apart, I tried to keep it all. I held too much. And in doing so, I became lost to myself. Jake sat up, his eyes wide. Whoa, so you're like the ocean's brain or something? The sea mother smiled faintly. Once, perhaps. But I am not whole now. I am a ripple of what once was. Finn leaned forward. Can you get your name back? Her gaze softened. Names are like tides, little. They come and go. What matters is that I am remembered even for a moment. That remembrance lets me be real again. The wind stirred faintly, carrying her words across the still air. The world has forgotten so much. But those who dream still give it life. Every memory you hold keeps the waters moving. Finn felt something shift deep within him, that familiar ache. The one he felt when saying goodbye, when realizing time moved even if he didn't want it to. I wish we could help you more, he said quietly. You don't deserve to be forgotten. The sea mother's expression turned serene. No one truly is. Even when the world forgets, the heart remembers. That is why I still breathe. Then, as if her body were made of dawnlight itself, she began to fade, dissolving into mist, her form scattering into countless tiny sparkles that drifted back into the sea. The light beneath the water brightened for one last beautiful moment, then stilled completely. Jake let out a slow sigh. That was kind of heavy, dude. Yeah, Finn murmured. But beautiful, too. They sat in silence, letting the sea cradle the quiet around them. The waves lapped softly against the boat, as though tucking them in. Far off in the distance, gulls cried faintly, their calls echoing across the still horizon. It was as if the world had started to breathe again. Then faintly the melody returned. Not a haunting tune now, but something gentle, a song of renewal. The same lullaby they had heard before, now brighter, clearer, full of life. The ocean was remembering its rhythm. Jake leaned back with a grin. I think she's okay now. She's just chilling again. Finn laughed softly. Yeah, maybe she's dreaming something new this time. He dipped his hand into the water again. It felt different now, lighter, peaceful. When he pulled it back out, a single drop clung to his finger, glowing faintly. Inside it, he thought, he saw something, an image of the ocean, vast and whole, reflecting an unbroken sky. Then the droplet faded, absorbed into the air like a sigh. They turned the boat around, heading home, but neither of them spoke for a long while. The quiet between them was full, not empty, carrying the unspoken understanding that they had witnessed something sacred. As the shoreline of Ooo began to appear in the distance, Jake broke the silence. You think anyone will believe us? Finn smiled faintly. Nah, but I don't think it matters. That night, long after they returned, Finn dreamt of standing at the ocean's edge again. The waves glowed softly, and the sea mother's voice echoed across the tide. Every name returns eventually, she said, even those lost to time. And when he woke, the sound of the sea still lingered in his ears, not just as a sound, but as a memory. A reminder that even things forgotten still live, so long as someone somewhere remembers to listen. When morning came to Ooo, the ocean looked ordinary again, blue and vast and alive with motion. The fishermen along the shores never guessed that the waves had once gone still, or that they had sung in the voice of something ancient. To them it was just another day, the tides faithful as ever. But for Finn and Jake, every shimmer of sunlight across the water now carried a quiet weight, like they had glimpsed the heart of something the world had long overlooked. They spent a few days camping near the shore, unable to leave just yet. The sea called softly each night, not in words, but in rhythm, the hush of waves against the sand, the way the wind bent the grass, the faint hum beneath everything. It felt alive in a way it hadn't before, like the ocean was still thinking about them. Finn sat by the fire one evening, poking at the embers. "You know," he said softly, "I think the Sea Mother was right. Nothing really disappears, not all the way. It just changes form. Maybe that's what memory is, the shape the past takes when it wants to stay." Jake chuckled from his spot on the sand, lazily floating on a bubble he'd blown for himself. "Man, that's deep. You're turning into a real philosopher lately." Finn smiled, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Nah, just thinking. The world's full of stuff like that, things that seem gone but aren't. Places that still remember even when people don't." He picked up a small seashell and held it to his ear. The sound inside was faint but steady, the old gentle hum. "It's still there," he whispered, "still singing." That night, as Finn drifted to sleep, he dreamt of walking beneath the ocean's surface. The water was clear and full of light. The Sea Mother was there, moving through her world of endless reflection, surrounded by shapes made of memory people, creatures, forgotten cities, suspended like constellations beneath the waves. She turned to him, her voice like the tide brushing against the shore. "You've reminded me of my name," she said, "but not in words, in kindness." Finn felt warmth bloom in his chest. "What was your name, really?" he asked. The Sea Mother smiled. "Aqualis," she said, "but you may remember me however your heart wishes. Every name given with love becomes true." When Finn awoke, he didn't tell Jake what he'd seen. Some dreams, he thought, are meant to stay, secret, gentle things meant only to be felt. But as they packed up to leave, he looked out one last time at the ocean. The waves caught the light and shimmered faintly, almost silver. It was enough to make him smile. Weeks later, back in the Candy Kingdom, Finn found something strange waiting for him. On his windowsill sat a glass bottle, stoppered with a bit of coral. Inside was a small amount of seawater, glowing faintly blue. No one knew where it had come from, but when he held it to the light, he swore he could hear the soft sound of the ocean's song, a melody that seemed to hum just for him. He placed it beside his bed. Some nights, when the world outside felt too quiet, he'd listen to it, the faint rhythm, the echo of waves, the whisper of something vast but gentle. It reminded him that even the forgotten parts of the world could still reach out, still connect, still be heard. One evening, BMO wandered into the room, blinking curiously at the glowing bottle. "Oh," BMO said softly. "That's pretty. What is it, Finn?" Finn smiled. "It's a piece of the ocean," he said, "a part that forgot its name." BMO tilted their head, puzzled. "That sounds sad." "It was," Finn replied. "But it's okay now?" He looked toward the window, where the real ocean glimmered faintly under the moonlight. It remembered what it means to be loved. BMO thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "That's a good thing to remember." Finn lay back, eyes half closed, listening to the rhythm of the bottle's soft hum mingling with the sound of waves in the distance. He could feel it, that same pulse that connected everything. Oceans, dreams, memories, even people, all part of one endless rhythm, flowing quietly through time. Somewhere far beneath the surface of the true ocean, a faint light stirred. The Sea Mother drifted through her depths, her form no longer fractured, her glow steady. Around her, the waters shimmered with soft currents of thought, stories drifting like petals on a breeze. Each one a memory returned, a fragment of her identity reclaimed. She whispered gently into the currents, her voice spreading through the deep. "Thank you, little hero. The world remembers again." Above, in Ooo, the tide shifted slightly, pulling a little closer to shore, as if the ocean itself were giving a goodnight hug. And so the sea that had forgotten its name became something new, not the same as before, but not lost anymore. Its story lived now in the hearts of those who had heard its song, carried quietly like a secret melody in the rhythm of sleep. And if you ever stand by the ocean in the stillness of night, when the world feels like it's holding its breath, you might just hear it too, that soft, steady hum beneath the waves, the sound of something vast, ancient, and kind, whispering back to you. I remember. Is a saying whispered among the ancient spirits of Ooo that every hero walks 3 paths in their lifetime. The path of courage, the path of loss, and finally, the path of return. Finn the human had walked the first 2 many times over. But this story begins on the quiet morning he began the 3rd. The years had passed gently since the age of great quests. The Candy Kingdom had grown into a place of peace, ruled not by war but by laughter and kindness. Jake's children were grown, each wandering across the land in their own small adventures. Marceline's songs echoed less often across the horizon now, carried instead on the warm air of memory. Even BMO had taken to sleeping long hours near the window, dreaming in electric static. And Finn, well, Finn had grown too. Not older in the sad sense, but older in the way the trees grow older, roots deep, branches reaching toward light. His hair was longer now, tied loosely behind his head, and a small scar ran along his jaw, a souvenir from some long-forgotten mischief with a fire elemental. But his eyes still held that same spark, that childlike mix of bravery and wonder that had carried him through every storm. One morning, as dawn broke over the plains of Ooo, Finn awoke to find something unusual in the sound, faint and steady, carried on the breeze like a heartbeat far away. He stepped outside his little home near the edge of the grasslands and listened. It wasn't music, not exactly. It was more like a rhythm the world itself was humming. He felt it in the soles of his feet, deep beneath the soil, a pulse. The same pulse he'd felt long ago in dungeons and dreams, in the laughter of friends, in the quiet moments after battles. It was the pulse of Ooo, but this morning it felt different, slower, as if the world was breathing out a long sigh. Jake appeared behind him, stretching lazily. "You feel that too, buddy?" he asked, his voice still full of that familiar warmth. "Yeah," Finn said softly. "It's like something's changing." Jake floated up a bit, looking out over the plains. "Maybe the world's just getting sleepy. Everything's got to rest sometimes, even magic." Finn smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I think it's calling to me." Jake looked at him, half amused, half knowing. "Another quest, huh?" Finn chuckled. "Maybe one last one." And so, with his old backpack slung over his shoulder and his sword now weathered, but still shining faintly blue at his side, Finn set out once more. Jake joined him, of course, because some friendships don't end with time. They just get quieter, easier, like the tide coming in. Their first stop was the tree fort. It was still standing, though nature had claimed most of it, vines crawling up the walls, wildflowers blooming through the cracks. The telescope still pointed toward the horizon, dusty but unbroken. Finn climbed the ladder and stood at the top, looking out over Ooo. The Candy Kingdom sparkled faintly in the distance. The Fire Kingdom shimmered like a mirage. The ice mountains glowed with soft light, no longer cruel but serene, peaceful. It was as if the whole world had softened over the years. Jake joined him, tail curling around the railing. "Man, remember when we used to stay up here all night, just talking about nonsense?" Finn smiled. "Yeah, I miss that." Jake grinned. "We can still talk nonsense." But as the wind shifted, Finn's smile faded slightly. At pulse, the heartbeat of Ooo grew stronger again. He turned toward the horizon and felt something stir deep inside him. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the quiet awareness that every story, no matter how long, eventually finds its last page. "Jake," he said softly, "do you ever think about what happens after all of it? Like after the last adventure? Jake leaned back, thoughtful. I think everything just keeps on vibing, man, you know? The adventures don't really stop, they just change shape. Maybe we'll turn into stars or songs or stories kids tell to fall asleep. Finn laughed quietly. Yeah, that sounds nice. They stayed there for a while, the two of them, sitting in the rustling wind. The air felt alive, full of distant echoes, the laughter of friends long gone, the whispers of old quests, the music of lives well lived. When they finally climbed down, Finn took one last look at the fort. Goodbye, old tree, he murmured. Thanks for everything. And the leaves seemed to rustle in reply as if saying, you're welcome. That night they camped under the stars near a lake that reflected the entire sky. Jake snored softly beside him, and Finn lay awake, staring at the reflection of the constellation stars arranged, and just so, like the faces of those he once knew. He saw Bubblegum's smile, Marceline's laugh, the Ice King's crown gleaming faintly in memory. He even thought he saw Flame Princess's fire flicker in the distance. All of them were still there in one way or another, still part of the song. And beneath it all, the world's heartbeat continued to echo softly, calling him forward towards something vast, peaceful, and beautifully unknown. The morning came painted in silver mist. Finn and Jake packed up their camp quietly, the early light shimmering over the lake's calm surface. The world around them felt still, as if Ooo itself was listening. The pulse had grown stronger, more defined, almost musical now, like a steady drumbeat beneath the soil. They followed it through meadows of whispering grass and forests that hummed faintly with unseen magic. Birds with translucent wings drifted between the trees, and every now and then a distant echo laugh, a sigh would ripple through the air. The land was changing, yes, but it wasn't dying. It was transforming, shedding its layers like the skin of an old story. Jake stretched into a long floating bridge over a stream, letting Finn cross easily. Man, it's wild how quiet everything is, he said. Remember when every few steps meant running into some crazy monster or magical nonsense? Finn smiled softly. Yeah, but I think all the noise just settled down. Like the world finally found some peace. Jake nodded. Guess we all get tired of fighting after a while. They passed through what used to be the Desert of Doom, now covered in soft dunes of golden dust. Strange flowers bloomed from the sand, glowing faintly as they walked by. Finn bent down to touch one, and for a moment a memory flashed through his mind, a vision of himself and Jake fighting a giant sandworm in that very place. The laughter, the yelling, the joy of being alive in chaos. Then it was gone, leaving only the flower's gentle warmth in his hand. Feels like the land remembers us, Finn said quietly. Jake grinned. Yeah, dude. Oo's got a long memory. We're part of its bedtime stories now. They walked until the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in soft pink and gold. That's when they saw it, the ocean. Or rather, what was left of it. The great blue expanse that once stretched endlessly was calm and shallow now, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Finn stepped closer, and the sound grew louder, that pulsing heartbeat rising from the water itself. Jake floated beside him. Whoa, you think it's coming from down there? Finn nodded slowly. I think so. Maybe the ocean remembers too. He knelt by the edge and let his fingers trail across the water's surface. It was warm, familiar. For a moment, he saw flashes beneath the shapes of old friends, adventures, moments frozen in memory. He saw himself as a boy again, laughing, sword raised high. He saw Flame Princess smiling through firelight. He saw BMO dancing in the tree fort, Jake's puppies tumbling around, and then, deeper still, he saw something vast and bright, like the heart of Ooo itself glowing beneath the waves. Finn stood up slowly. Jake, I think this is where it ends. Jake's smile faded just a little. You mean where you end? Finn shook his head. No, where it all comes together. I think this is what the world's been trying to tell me. They sat at the edge for a long time, saying nothing. The air felt heavy with peace, the kind that doesn't ask questions. Finn reached into his bag and pulled out a few small keepsakes. The broken hilt of a sword, a leaf from the tree fort, a tiny piece of BMO's old circuit board he'd once found in the grass. He placed them gently on the sand. Jake tilted his head. What are you doing, man? Leaving them behind, Finn. Just little pieces of who I was. Maybe Ooo can keep them safe. The water shimmered faintly as if agreeing. The wind softened, carrying the smell of salt and wildflowers. Jake sighed. You sure about this? We could still head back, chill out, and grab some snacks. You don't gotta finish every quest. Finn smiled, eyes glinting in the fading light. This one's different, Jake. It's not about finishing. It's about letting go. Jake looked down, his expression caught somewhere between sadness and pride. You always did know how to make things sound deep, bro. Finn chuckled softly. Guess I learned from you. As night fell, the two of them made a small campfire near the shore. They roasted a few marshmallows, Jake pulling them from his stretchy pocket like old times, and watched the stars rise. The constellations twinkled faintly, and for a moment, Finn thought he saw shapes among them, a crown, a sword, a candy castle, a wolf's tail. All memories, written into the night sky. Jake strummed a little tune on a makeshift guitar he'd crafted from driftwood. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm and familiar, the way songs should be. Finn lay back, arms behind his head, listening to the soft rhythm of the waves and Jake's quiet humming. The world pulsed with the same heartbeat again, slow, steady, eternal. He whispered, You ever think we were just part of Oo's dream, Jake? Like maybe the world dreamed us into being so it wouldn't be lonely? Jake smiled, his eyes half closed. If that's true, then it's a good dream, man. Real good. The fire crackled softly. The water shimmered. And somewhere beneath it all, the pulse grew louder still, not threatening, not final, just welcoming. A sign that the last adventure was near. The stars that night were brighter than Finn had ever seen them. They shimmered in soft blues and golds, and for a fleeting second, he thought they might be winking at him, like the universe itself recognized him, remembered him. The ocean before him glowed faintly with that same pulse of light, the soft rhythm of a heartbeat echoing in time with his own. Jake had drifted to sleep beside the dying campfire, his snores rolling through the night air like distant thunder. Finn didn't sleep, though. He just sat there listening. The call of the sea, the whisper of the wind, and that ever-present pulse beneath it all. He could feel it now, not just in the earth or the water, but inside him, as though Ooo and he were one living, breathing being, and they were both growing tired in the same gentle, contented way. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he wasn't sitting by the fire anymore. He was standing in shallow water, ankle deep, with the stars reflected beneath his feet like a second sky. The horizon was gone, replaced by endless starlight and shimmering waves that seemed to stretch forever. Jake, he called softly, but there was no answer, only the sound of the ocean breathing. Then from the distance a figure appeared, faint at first, then clearer as it drew near. A boy dressed in blue with a green backpack and a white bear hat. The boy smiled, eyes bright and innocent, and Finn realized he was looking at himself, the young version, the one who used to run through Ooo laughing and yelling, never afraid of what lay ahead. The boy tilted his head. You made it. Finn's throat felt tight. Yeah, he whispered. I guess I did. You had fun, didn't you? Finn nodded. The best. The boy grinned. Then that's all that matters. For a moment they stood there, watching the rippling starlight together. Then, just as quietly as he came, The boy began to fade, dissolving into light. When Finn looked down, he saw that the water beneath him wasn't water at all. It was memory. Every ripple shimmered with scenes from his life. There he was, fighting alongside Jake. There he was, comforting the Ice King, dancing with Flame Princess, laughing with Marceline, sitting beside Princess Bubblegum, talking quietly about nothing and everything. Every moment glowed, then drifted away like mist, until only one reflection remained out of the tree fort, standing tall beneath the morning sun. The heartbeat of Ooo pulsed once more, deep and slow. Finn. The voice came from behind him, soft and kind. He turned, and there stood Jake, not as he was, but glowing faintly, his outline made of warm light. He looked younger, his fur bright and golden, eyes full of calm. "Hey, buddy," Jake said, floating toward him. "Jake, you're here." "Of course, dude. Where else would I be? You didn't think I'd let you finish this alone, did you?" Finn laughed, and it came out like a sigh of relief. "Guess not." Jake's light shimmered faintly. "The world's ready, man. Oo's been singing this lullaby for a while now. You feel it too, right?" Finn nodded. "Yeah, it's beautiful." The ocean's glow intensified, surrounding them in soft warmth. The waves rose higher, not threateningly, but gently like hands lifting them upward. Finn reached out, and Jake took his hand. Together they floated above the water, surrounded by starlight and memory. Finn looked down one last time. He saw the kingdoms of Ooo spread out below the Candy Kingdom, glimmering in soft pink hues, the Fire Kingdom glowing faintly amber, the Ice Mountains shining with calm blue light. Every place they had touched, every soul they had met, still shimmered with life. The world wasn't ending. It was dreaming. Jake squeezed his hand. "You know what this feels like, Finn?" "What?" "Like the end of a song. Not sad or anything. Just complete." Finn smiled. "Yeah. Like when the last note fades and the silence after still feels full." The two of them hovered in that silence, suspended in warmth and light. Then slowly they began to drift upward higher and higher into the endless shimmer of stars. As they rose, Finn felt lighter, freer. The memories didn't vanish, they joined the light, becoming part of the sky itself. He could see them twinkling around him, small glimmers of laughter, friendship, and courage that would never fade. Jake laughed softly. "Dude, look. We're part of the constellations now." Finn looked around and saw its stars forming familiar shapes. The tree fort, the grass sword, a tiny BMO face smiling among the stars. It was all there, woven into the fabric of the sky. He felt no fear, no sorrow, just warmth, just peace. As the light embraced them fully, Jake glanced over, his grin wide and easy. "Told you, bro. Everything just keeps on vibing." Finn chuckled, eyes closing as the light grew brighter. "Yeah, Jake, it really does." And for a moment it felt as though the whole universe was breathing one slow, gentle inhale. The heartbeat of Ooo slowed, then softened into silence. Not an ending, but a lullaby, a song that would hum forever through the stars, through dreams, through stories yet to be told. Then there was only light, soft, golden, eternal. And somewhere far away, a child's voice whispered, "Come on, Jake, let's go adventuring." The light that surrounded Finn and Jake began to soften, folding inward like the last pages of a well-loved book. The ocean, the stars, the constellations of memory, they all shimmered one final time before melting into a horizon of pale gold. For a heartbeat, Finn wondered if this was what waking felt like after a lifetime of dreaming. He found himself standing once again on solid ground. But this wasn't Ooo as he remembered it. The grass was made of glassy strands that sang quietly in the wind, and the sky shimmered with gentle auroras that pulsed in rhythm with the world's soft heartbeat. It was both familiar and new, a reflection of everything that ever was and everything still waiting to be. Jake stood beside him, looking around with quiet awe. "Whoa," he breathed. "This place is wild. Do you think this is the next level?" Finn nodded slowly. "Yeah. I think it's where stories go when they're done being told." Jake laughed softly. "That's a nice way to put it." They began to walk, not with purpose, but with comfort through this new dream of a world. Every step echoed with memories. The wind carried voices faint, loving, eternal. Marceline's laughter blended with the hum of BMO's circuits. Bubblegum's careful words mingled with the growls of Lady Rainicorn's song. Even Ice King's voice could be heard somewhere in the distance, humming a lullaby that had no beginning and no end. As they walked, Finn noticed something glinting ahead, a familiar shape rising from the earth. The tree fort. But not quite. This one shimmered as if woven from light and memory, its branches glowing with the soft colors of every story that had ever taken place there. They climbed the ladder, and the wood felt warm beneath their hands like it remembered them. Inside, everything was as it used to be. The couch where they'd once sat eating sandwiches, the framed doodles Jake had made, the tiny groove on the wall from one of BMO's experiments, gone wrong. Jake stretched out on the couch with a sigh. "Feels good to be home." Finn sat beside him, leaning back against the cushions. "It really does." They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. Outside, the glow of the world pulsed softly, bathing the tree fort in the colors of dawn. It wasn't the dawn of a new day, or the end of an old one, just a moment suspended in peace. After a time, Finn looked out the window. The sky beyond shimmered like the ocean's surface, rippling with starlight and gentle gold. "You think anyone remembers us down there?" he asked. Jake tilted his head. "Of course, man. They'll always remember, not just us, but the feeling of it all, the adventures, the laughter, the love. Stories don't fade. They just sleep for a while." Finn smiled softly. "Yeah, sleep for a while." He closed his eyes and took a long, steady breath. The air was cool and sweet, like the first breeze of morning. He could still hear that pulse, the world's heartbeat, but now it matched perfectly with his own. Slow, steady, peaceful. The tree fort began to glow more brightly, the edges of everything dissolving into light. Jake stretched out an arm, wrapping it comfortably around his best friend. "You did good, dude," he murmured. "Real good." Finn smiled faintly. "Couldn't have done it without you?" Jake chuckled, his voice fading slightly. "Nah, you would have been fine, but I'm glad I was here." Finn turned his head just enough to look at him. "Me too." The light filled the room completely now, warm, golden, safe. The world outside melted into the same glow, like a candle's flame before sleep. For a moment, everything was still. Then from somewhere deep within that endless light came the sound of a familiar laugh, a child's laugh. And Finn realized it wasn't a memory this time, it was a beginning. He saw glimpses again, a new tree fort, bright and young. A new pair of adventurers running through the grass. The world was dreaming new dreams now, carrying forward the love, the courage, and the spirit that he and Jake had once shared. Finn felt a deep calm settle over him. His eyes grew heavy, but not from weariness, from peace. The kind that comes only when every question has been answered. Every adventure has found its resting place. Jake's voice came softly, like the wind through leaves. "Guess it's time to rest, huh?" Finn nodded, eyes closing. "Yeah, just for a while." The two of them sat there in the glowing tree fort, the light wrapping around them like a blanket. Outside, the stars continued to hum, and the ocean of memory rippled gently beneath the new sky. The heartbeat of Ooo slowed, then steadied into quiet. Every sound, every laugh, every song, every whisper drifted together into one final melody. Not an ending, not really, just the soft rhythm of a world at peace. And as the last of the light folded over them, Finn's voice came one final time, barely louder than a breath. Good night.